Kendra read the words aloud and then walked around to look at the other side. Nothing on the back. It was strange to think that in her hometown she had her own false headstone. Her parents still believed she was buried there, but it was for the best. If it would keep them safe, it was worth it. Trask and Gavin crouched and began scraping at the earth with spades. Kendra surveyed the churchyard. Mara, Dugan, and Tanu were keeping watch somewhere while Warren kept the lights burning in some of their sleeping quarters. This is like digging through iron, Gavin complained. Trask paused, uncapping a vial Tanu had lent him and sprinkling some of the contents on the ground. After a moment, they resumed digging and seemed to make faster headway. Kendra felt tense. The keep had an oppressive atmosphere. Designed to house a small army, the sturdy complex felt too large and too empty. There were too many parapets, too many obscure windows and alcoves, too many places to hide. She could not help wondering who might be watching. As her friends chopped deeper into the defiant earth, the sounds of their excavation were magnified by unnatural echoes. Kendra scanned the surrounding walls for unfriendly eyes. Simran came to mind. Earlier in the day, she had glimpsed the snake woman climbing straight up a wall to a catwalk, palms flat against the stone instead of gripping, moving up the vertical surface like a gecko. Was Simran spying on them right now, peering down from a gloomy perch, ready to convey information to the dragons? During the day, Kendra had run across other creatures besides the Minotaur and the Snake Woman and the Alcitar. She had seen a huge hunchback ogre with meaty forearms and a pruned face crossing a courtyard with an anvil under one arm. The lumpy brute had one eye larger than the other, and a scabby bald head fringed by thin yellow hair. She had also noticed a man no taller than her waist springing around on slender legs like a grasshopper. Who knew what other unusual assistants Agad had enlisted? This headstone does reach deeper than one would suspect, Trask panted. Any words yet, Kendra? Gavin asked. Kendra crouched and saw the first lines of a message. Yes! Kendra got out a pen and paper, the pen and paper she had brought. They had decided to have her write down the inscription to avoid discussing the clue out in the open. Trask, Gavin grunted as they prodded and scraped deeper into the ground, revealing more of the deeply rooted tombstone. Trask sprinkled more of the potion Tanu had provided, and Gavin began attacking the soil with a small pickaxe. A flare of light made Kendra glance up, and she caught the end of a shooting star streaking across the sky. By the time the entire message was exposed, a ring of rocks and dirt surrounded the sizable hole. Perspiration glistened on Trask's hairless head. Although the inscription was written in small letters, Kendra could read the message without difficulty. Sitting at the edge of the hole, she copied the words. The object you desire is an iron egg the size of a pineapple, the top half crowned with protuberances, hidden inside the treasury of the secret dragon temple, alongside other items sacred to dragons. Access is heavily guarded. Success is unlikely. Retrieve no extra items. Ignore the gauntlets. Enmity with dragons is no minor concern. Tell no dragon you seek the temple, including Agad. Directions to the temple can be had at the Fairy Queen's shrine near Split Veil Falls. Got it, Kendra said, folding the note. Trask and Gavin set about refilling the hole, packing the rocks and soil back into place as best they could. While she waited, Kendra reread the message several times. Kendra had not suspected the Fairy Queen would have a shrine here at the sanctuary. She had not seen a single fairy. Apparently, Kendra would have been joining the others whether or not Agad had allowed them to stay. If the Fairy Queen shrine at Wormroost was anything like the shrine at Fablehaven, Kendra was the only person who might survive trespassing there. She tried not to imagine what obstacles might await if they managed to locate the Dragon Temple. It was already clear that Patton had set out to make the translocator hard to find. He had meant business. Seth tried to resist, but the voices were so insistent. He hung near the top of the ladder for several minutes, listening to the whispery pleas, trying in vain to stifle his curiosity. The gibbering chorus reminded him of the Hall of Dread. The indistinct voices overlapped so much that most words were hard to catch. He most frequently heard hunger, thirst, and mercy. Warren had trusted him to stay put. Seth didn't want to make a stupid blunder, not here at Wormroost, with so much at stake. But once the whispers had begun, he had found them impossible to ignore. What if the hushed voices led to important secrets that only he could uncover? This would be his chance to prove he belonged on the adventure. Pushing up the leather flap of the knapsack, Seth climbed out into the guardhouse and crouched in silence. The dark, still courtyard awaited beyond the door. Outside of the knapsack, he could discern that the babbling whispers originated from a single direction, reaching his ears from a source deeper inside the keep. Keeping to the wall, Seth crept out into the gloomy courtyard, eyes wandering up to the starry firmament. Considering the lack of light, his shade-walking abilities should make him nearly invisible to onlookers. Leaving the knapsack was a risk, but the possibility of gaining useful information about the sanctuary was too attractive. He might even be able to create an alliance with a powerful being. Desperate situations sometimes called for extreme measures. And to be honest, if nothing else, it was a reasonably good excuse to get out of the stuffy storage room. The crisp mountain air was already rejuvenating his spirits. Closed portcullises and a raised drawbridge barred an excursion beyond the wall. Across from the gateway, the main building loomed dimly visible by starlight, accessible by a single heavy door. Staying near the walls, tense and watchful, Seth looked the long way around the courtyard before reaching the iron-bound door. To his delight, he found it unlocked. In the cavernous room beyond, Seth debated taking out his flashlight. It was too dark to see, but he decided that even a muted glare would be too risky in such a prominent room. Instead of navigating by sight, he followed the confused babble, the voices increasing in volume as he inched across the room, shins, toes, and outstretched hands occasionally bumping against unforeseen obstacles. Finally, Seth reached a wall and then a doorway. Briefly risking his flashlight with a hand cupped over the bright side, he found a stairway that went up and another that went down. The whispers were definitely coming from a lower part of the building. Maybe the stronghold had a dungeon like the one at Fablehaven. Upon hearing a gritty scrape from above, Seth extinguished his flashlight and backed against the wall. The scuffing sound had been unnatural. A moment later, he heard faint footfalls carefully descending the stairs. The unseen person reached the bottom steps and then stopped. Seth could hear steady breathing. They were in the graveyard, a low voice said, digging up Patton's grave. Did they take anything? A quiet female voice answered. No, they seemed interested in the markings on the headstone. They have returned to their rooms? Far as I could tell. Keep an eye out. I'll check their wing. Seth remained rigid in the darkness, an anxious hand squeezing his flashlight. From the timbre of the voices, he suspected the snake lady Warren had described and the Minotaur. But there was no way to be sure. He had heard soft steps shuffling away across the cavernous room. Once he thought he was alone again, Seth considered returning to the knapsack. If he had expected to keep to be crawling with spies, he would have stayed in his hiding place. But the gibbering whispers persisted, and now that he was out and about, it would be a shame not to finish what he had started. It didn't sound like either of the speakers had descended the stairs, so Seth moved